going to present on risk preferences of smallholder coffee producers in Nepalese context. My supervisors are Ram, Ben and Maxim. So just to start with the background of the farming in the hills. So this picture on the left hand side, figure on the left hand side shows the interdependence and interlinkage of hill agriculture farming systems, and shows how households derive their consumable and non-consumable food and cash requirement from different components. And in the hill farming systems, livestock, field crops and agroforestry is the major component that sustain the livelihood of household farming, and also they are engaged in off-farm activities where they derive cash and food security support from this component by allocating their resources to different components. So in the right hand side, here we have a typical Nepalese farm household with crop and livestock in their farm, and also shows household engagement in farm and off-farm activities. And this person is also enjoying leisure over there. Field is crop coffee is planted in limited parcels for land, but not all in the land, but in limited parcels for land. And households are quite small holders. Most of the households, the average land holding is less than a hectare. It's around 0.92 hectare per households, and they, they don't have to rely, they can't rely on their farming to get a livelihood support, and they have to dependent on farming as well as farm activities. In context to coffee farming, government has identified this as one of the income generating potential activities crop in Nepal.
So where's the, please point out where the coffee is in the photo?
Yeah, this one is the coffee. This one is the coffee.
Okay.
So households are generally in risk, and the risk attitude and risk preferences depends on, and for households' decision to adopt certain commodity, farm and off-farm commodity, and some farming commodity depends specifically on the risk preferences. And risk preferences, when we look over risk preferences, it depends on household characteristics, household context is context specific, is social settings, depends on social settings, and location specific, and household choices as well as, and expected contributions, what they are expecting from particular enterprise, and it depends, it determines their risk preferences. And there is growing evidences that smallholders are risk averse, and they operate under risk and uncertainty. And when we look over the context of the developing countries, we can't rely on a single measure to measure the risk preferences, the risk attitude of the households. There are several limitations because there is a lack of highly reliable data from developing countries, and households' economic decision here is so complex that they have to look different components before deciding certain innovations. And what type of questions we put in the experiment and survey, and it also depends on that. And household context that led to differently respond differently to risk elicitation questions and their level of understandings. So I would like to deviate in a history, certain story behind the coffee production in Nepal. So on the left hand side I am there. This file shows that coffee was lately introduced in 1980s in Nepal, and after 15 to 20 years of coffee, this was completely covered by coffee in the past, almost 25 to 30 years back. After 15 to 20 years of coffee plantation. But after the global coffee crisis, it put several pressures to smallholder farmers, in particular in developing countries. We have a small share of coffee production. Like in Vietnam, so many farmers were affected by this global coffee crisis. So farmers started to clear this coffee plantation. This is the place where the single government office is located to promote the coffee. So, and there is another component that coffee, which was a major crop in the past, is being secondary crop in these days in some places. This is because coffee is generating less income than from other commodity like citrus and other fruit crops. Here, more recently, there is severe infestation of the coffee stem borer, which is creating a new threat to coffee producers. And this lady, if I have time, I will also show one video. She has 2,500 plants, and she lost 500 plants in 1 or 2 years from the coffee stem borer. And that's the coffee stem borer. Not only this, there are some good indicators that there are some good market signal is good, so that the farmers in many districts, they are motivated towards coffee plantation. I mean, there is both challenge and opportunities in the coffee production. And this is a photo from the Lalitpur district, which is very close to Kathmandu, and farmers are taking it as a promoting crop in their farmland. And this is really booming in that district, including in other new districts where coffee is produced and is coming up. So why risk? Risk is important because Gerson in early 19, he theoretically established that risk is inversely associated with innovation decision, and he suggested that optimal land allocation for innovative crop depends with higher risk aversion. I mean, if farmers find some specific innovation as risk averse, then they are reluctant to expand their area under particular crop. And it also impacts on labor allocation because farmers, they are deriving income from different component, and they decide quickly, and they are very sensitive to income from income component from different crops. And this is because this also shapes household decision to promote particular farm and off-farm activities and what enterprise to be promoted within their farming land. So when we look over Nepalese context, in connection to global coffee crisis, when the coffee farmers face troubles, and after 5 to 7 years, the coffee prices rise again. This is because there was a trend in the production of the specialty coffee, and some coffee growers started to produce organic coffee. So in this connection, farmers, government of Nepal launched national coffee policy to motivate farmers in coffee production, and particularly targeting at the middle smallholder farmers in the mid-hill of the Nepal. But despite this policy, there is not a significant increase in the coffee area as expected, and the experiences also show that in the past farmers were forced to sell their crop at low prices, and also they got the delayed payment, which ultimately forced them to clear those funds and to motivate to deviate from the coffee to other crops. So, and there is also low income potential. When they compare, and more recently, farmers' labor migration is prominently increasing, and they find agriculture as the last resort to stay, and they find other off-farm activities where they get more income from those sources, and agriculture is left behind. And so we have both story. I mean, replacing coffee by alternative crop and vice versa. I mean, coffee is also replacing in some area, and coffee is also getting threat in some areas, in other areas. So in this connection, we will look 3 components in this analysis. We will measure risk attitude of farm households using multiple risk elicitation technique, and we will identify determinants of risk preferences first, and also identify determinants of extreme risk aversion, and examine the relationship between household risk preferences and their impact on the labor and land allocation. So our data comes from coffee producing districts. The shaded area, they are the areas where coffee is produced, and the green shaded area is the major district. There are 9 districts that contribute 2/3 of the national coffee production, and we select one from each development region, I mean the central and western development region, and select farm households randomly within the districts. And we consider regional balance and mode of production, I mean the certified and non-certified organic producers from this. And some of the records, we basically collected data. In case of certified organic producers, there was farmers had maintained diary, and we got some reliable data, and in some cases we had to ask them to get information from them. So regarding the theoretical framework, we used constant absolute risk aversion to measure with employing power utility function to measure the risk coefficient, and we developed conceptual framework of risk preferences and extreme risk aversion as a function of household assets, farmers' characteristics, gender, prior experiences, socioeconomic variables, and location, I mean the regional heterogeneity. And we used ordered probit model to determine the determinant of risk preferences, and logit model to determine the determinants of extreme risk aversion. So here is the nature of the data what we collected. So we used 2 methods, one psychometric scale and another is a hypothetical questions. In psychometric scale, we asked 2 questions. First, we asked whether the farmer is willing to take a risk regardless of the price and yield, and whether farmers is willing to invest more in the coffee enterprises in the future based on the return from the coffee. In hypothetical questions, we ask 3 questions. Here we have 4 sets, but the first 3 questions include questions for preferences of income, income from the coffee farming, price related to coffee, and the production of the coffee from the farm. We also use this coffee income. We also use this coffee income. We modified the questions in binary form. I mean, we asked the same questions using the binary because this would allow us to make a more consistent result, whether there is some inconsistency in the response or like that. So in those questions, the farmers selected 1 out of 5 options, and here in the coffee binary, they selected this one and this one. I mean, they decided at each level.
I mean, for each of those questions, there was 5 response options.
Yep.
Like
They have to select 1 from out of the 5.
Very high to very low, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like a low cut scale.
Yeah, they started from the very safe to the riskiest one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in second, so in binary you ask 5 times.
5 times. They have to decide at each level.
I understand.
Yeah. And like in the psychometric, we ask 5-point Likert type scaling that range from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and we could put neutral as a trade-off between agree and disagree. In hypothetical, we asked to choose 1 out of 5, and that started with the safest at the beginning and gradually increased the riskiness of outcome. And farmers were asked to compare subsequent options before moving to another one, before deciding choosing the appropriate one. And we asked the questions based on the coffee return only, because there is a return from the coffee and non-coffee product, but we focus on the coffee product. We simplified. In some cases, this hypothetical questions is very complicated. We can ask, design the question in a complicated way, but considering the locality and the educational background of the farmers, we simplified it. So that the farmers would decide it very easily and understand the questions. So in step B, we calibrated the questions in different 5 levels, and they decide at each level. So what's the result of the psychometric scales? We asked 2 questions, and when we asked the 2 questions, farmers, when we asked general questions on their attitude to risk, they tended to incline towards risk-taking behavior. But when asked more specific about their investment decision in future, they were reluctant to risk-taking, and they were generally risk-averse. So less of the farmers, they choose risk preferences. So the mean of the risk willingness to take risk was 3.79, almost taking inclined to risk preference, and it was in case of investment decision, they were a bit reluctant towards risk preferences. And when we check the reliability of these 2 instruments, because we have only 2 instruments, and it was very poor reliable, and we can't determine, we can't be assured by asking these 2 questions only about the risk preference behavior of the farmers. So we also had
Sorry, Govinda, I don't understand the difference between the 2. They're willing to take a risk and willing to invest more. Willing to invest more is taking a risk. So how are they different?
I mean, in the past, we asked them whether you are willing to take risk in coffee, regardless of the price and yield. And in second question, we asked, are you willing to invest more in these enterprises? So in first questions, they tended to take risk. Yes, I am willing to take risk. But when we asked about their investment decision, are you willing to invest more? Then they a bit thought, and oh no, I'm not. I'm willing to take risk, but I'm not willing to invest more. Yeah, and it has a low reliability, and we can't confidently say that based on these questions, we can't assure the the risk preferences. So we also ask hypothetical questions for this, and we found that when we asked more specific questions, majority of the farmers, they were found extremely risk averse. I mean, they don't want to take more risk. But in case of production, they were extremely risk averse in case of income, but relatively less risk averse in case of prices, and less risk averse in case of production, because prices, they don't have a control over the prices, but they could control over the yield. And also they derive some non-coffee product from the farm, so that they can take a little bit risk on production. So we calculated R coefficient for different component. We had one limitation. We designed some questionnaire. Our R coefficient deviates at each steps. We designed some questionnaires so that the farmers can understand. So we don't have same set of R coefficient for each instrument. This is our limitation. So when we asked these questions, the reliability of this hypothetical only is almost is very strong. And when we combine with reliability coefficient, I mean Cronbach alpha, with psychometric scale, it drops down to 0.86. So it still is a highly reliable measure of the risk preferences. So what we found, when we asked very general questions, farmers tend to respond their risk preferences behavior. I mean, they are willing to take risk. When we ask specific questions, they find themselves as risk averse. Here we measure the correlations. There is a strong and positive correlations among willingness to take risk, income, price, coffee yield, and these two are almost same. And there is a very limited farm households. They have inconsistent response. I have to delete that one. I have to rework that one. Now before moving to measurement of risk preferences, so we sort out some economic issue. We checked for multicollinearity and heteroscedasticity. We find that after checking, our model doesn't suffer from multicollinearity issue, and we also address our robust estimator of variance to control this issue, and we used a lean log model. I won't like to go for variable definitions. So the result of order probit model, here dependent variable is farmers' risk preferences measured in 1 to 5 responses from increasing order of risk preferences. So what we found here, livestock is highly associated with farmers' risk-taking behavior on coffee farming with response to different instruments. And experience is negatively associated with risk preference behavior. I mean, the more the experience of the farmers, they are less willing to take risk, because this might be possibly because farmers who grow coffee suffered in the past, and also some of the old farmers with old orchard, they are suffering from stem borer. That might be the cause where farmers are not willing to take risk. And group membership is associated with willing to take risk and invest more, while cooperative membership and institutional loan is associated with willingness to improve and invest more. Ethnicity, farmers who are in ethnic group, they are negatively associated with risk preference. I mean, they are less risk preferable. And district, which is measured by, in this case, the district one is for a remote district, Gulmi. The remoteness of district is negatively associated with risk preference. I mean, they have a very relatively they have poor market access as compared to Lalitpur, which is very close to Kathmandu. They have farmers in Lalitpur, they have better market access. That's why they are promoting. And non-farm wage. Non-farm wage is the participation of at least one household member in non-farm wage activities. This participant in non-farm wage has a positive relation with risk-taking behavior. I mean that they have some income from others. They are also backed from other sources of income. That's why they are willing to take risk. So here we found that significant number of households were in extreme risk-averse categories. So we also calculated, we also estimated risk preferences and the risk aversion behavior of those households. And here we scored 1 for risk aversion, extreme risk aversion category, and 0 for others. So what we find, a dependent variable extreme risk aversion. So our result is consistent with earlier measurement. I mean, the regression of order probit model and logic model are consistent in explaining the determinant of risk aversion. And livestock has a negative association with extreme risk aversion. Experience has a positive relationship with extreme risk aversion. Ethnicity has mostly positive relationship with extreme risk aversion. District also extreme risk, positive relationship with extreme risk aversion. I mean the results are consistent in both models. Finally, we look over the relationship between risk preferences and labor and land allocation. Here we look over the labor allocations. This is labor allocation pattern for whole sample. But when we don't see any significant trend, it's increasing in the beginning and then drop down. But we carry out separate regression for marginal households. I mean those who don't have income from the off-farm sources and who have less than 50% of income from off-farm sources in their household income. they have they replace. I mean, there is a significant that curve goes up. That's labor in coffee is replacing from the labor in cropland. Similarly, when we look over the land allocation pattern, we find that there is no differences in the share of land allocated to coffee, but the net area is bit increasing with the risk preferences. So, what we conclude from our findings is that psychometric, I mean the general risk elicitation method combined with hypothetical gives more reliable estimates. The results mostly correlate, our results mostly correlate each other. Households tend to prefer risk with general questions, but find themselves as risk averse with income, price, and yield specific questions. The regression of hypothetical specific and more consistent than the psychometric general one. Risk preferences help shifting labor to coffee farming from other crop activities for households with low and no off-farm income assets. Total land is also linearly associated with risk preferences. And what we can derive here is for policy component implication. We have to give priority to the government should give priority to households with low and no limited access to off-farm income, because those households who have access to off-farm income is not mattering the investing in. They are not benefiting much more. So marginal households, it provides some economic incentives to their household income. So we have a time. We have a 2-minute video. I will try to open.
हामीले चाहिँ 2057 सालदेखि चाहिँ कफी लगाउन सुरु गरेको 57 सालदेखि वर्षेनी 200-400 का हिसाबले चाहिँ रोप्दै अहिलेसम्म हामीले रोप्दाखेरि चाहिँ 2500 जति बोट रोपियो, तर चाहिँ गवारोले खाएर अहिले त्यो 2000 जति बोट छन्। अझै पनि गवारोले सताइराख हामीलाई। ठुलो मेन समस्या भनेको गवारो हो। यहाँ कफी चाहिँ एकदम सजिलो खेती, विदेशमा निर्यात हुने, राम्रो भए तापनि गवारोले गर्दाखेरि हामीलाई धेरै समस्या पारेछ। हजुर, एकदमै हाम्रो अर्गानिक प्रमाणीकरण भएर जो कफी गइराख, कफी बेच्नको लागि सजिलो भयो। हाम्रो यो रुरु गाविसको 7, 8, 9 मा गरेर चाहिँ हाम्रो 4वटा समूह छ। 4वटा समूहमा कोही समूहमा 20 जना र कोही समूहमा 25 जना गर्दा सरदरमा 80-90 जना जति किसान छन्, कफी किसान। यो हाम्रो उत्पादन चाहिँ अहिले चाहिँ नेपालमै पनि खपत भयो र धेरै विदेशमा चाहिँ कोरिया जान्छ असल।
तलमाथि मूल्य हुनु
भन्दा पनि
दिगो मूल्य
एकै खालको
भन्दा पनि दिगो मूल्य अब समय परिस्थितिले पनि जान पर्यो। अब मैले भन्नु भने 100-150 हुन खोजेको भन्ने कुरा होइन। 48 थियो अहिले कता 45 निर्धारण गर्ने भन्ने तमासी बस्यो। भर्खरैमा चाहिँ 40 रुपियाँ किलोमा एफएमले फुकिसक्यो यो डिगामको भनिसकेपछि। अब त्यस्तो चाहिँ भने अलिकति कृषकलाई त्यो पनि सुविधा हो कि किला 5 रुपियाँ घटेर पाउने, 45 पाउने हो। अब जेठा गरेर हजुर
नगरे चाहियो नि कुरा
नगरे पायो भने कृषकले चाँडो चाहिँ सदुपयोग गर्छु। सरकारले पनि केही हामीलाई तालिम अनि त्यो अर्ग्यानिकलाई तालिम, अर्ग्यानिकलाई चाहिँ केही भनौँ न सहुलियत ब्याज दरमा ऋण, किनभने कहिले उतातिर चाह्यो भने बार ल्याउ भने अलिक महँगो पनि जाला। जहिले त अपरेटरलाई पनि फाइदा अनि चाहिँ कृषकलाई पनि फाइदाको जस्तो लाग्यो हाटको बाटोमा।
Thank you.